Ladies and gentlemen, we have just got some alarming insights revealed by one of the most respected names in the world of finance, Jeffery Gundlach. In one of his recent interviews with Yahoo Finance, he shared his views regarding the upcoming economic upheaval, which will have devastating consequences for the US economy. As we will see later in the video, the US dollar is on the verge of losing its status as the world's reserve currency. The COVID-19 pandemic, the real estate bubble in the USA, supply chain crisis, as well as the shocking shortage of workers all point to the same conclusion, meaning United States is headed towards a Great Depression. Jeffery Gundlach, who is one of the most respected experts in the finance sector, shared his views regarding upcoming depression in a recent interview. We will only focus on the main points of this interview to keep the information short, concise, and focused. Here are his views regarding the upcoming disaster.
I almost feel like there's no turning back on some of these things. I feel like the Taiwan-Chinese situation is getting near an end game. I think the US dollar reserve currency situation is getting more near an end game. And that's really going to be the game changer. When I say the next bailout is going to be the one that maybe breaks the camel's back, I think it'll take the dollar down. Mm-hmm. So it's in the next recession, I think, that we're going to see dollar weakness. And the dollar is very, very overvalued versus our twin deficits. One of my most trusted indicators is the direction of the dollar broadly versus the twin deficits as a percentage of GDP. There's a long lead time. It's a long-term thing. It doesn't work for a year. It's something that has like an 8-year cycle.
So nowadays, the US dollar is the dominant reserve currency. The British pound occupied a similar status in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Preceding the British pound in this leading role was the Dutch guilder, also known as the florin, which lost its status as a reserve currency over the 1781 to 1792 period. So it is not going to be something very strange or unusual if US dollar loses its status as a reserve currency. The Dutch reserve currency florin was in many ways a modern construct. The florin existed only as ledger entries in the accounts of an early central bank, the Bank of Amsterdam. And it was unusual for the time that the bank's money was not inherently redeemable in a precious metal coin or coins, nor its value was defined by any specific metal coin or coins. To call it by its modern name, the florin was in fact fiat money. As a supplier of fiat money, the Bank of Amsterdam engaged in many of the same activities as central banks today. When confronted with the major crisis in 1781, the bank reacted in a manner that may seem familiar to modern observers. Responding to the outbreak of war between the Dutch Republic and Britain, which is also called the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War, the bank embarked on a policy of aggressive open market purchases. This policy was paired with an unprecedented increase in the bank's lending activity, particularly to a large government-sponsored enterprise, the Dutch East India Company. This last policy was especially daring, as wartime disruptions to the company's operations soon meant that it was in no position to repay its debts. By 1783, the value of the florin began to suffer. The bank then reacted by reversing the direction of its open market activity, but it lacked adequate reserves with which to conduct defensive operations. The bank's difficulties soon ran deeper. Fast forward in 1790, the bank florin came under acute pressure following the outbreak of the French Revolution. The bank responded by attempting to enforce a sudden 9% reduction in the value of its money relative to silver. Protests from the market participants led the city to inject capital into the bank over the year 1791 to 1792. The recapitalization temporarily halted the decline in the value of the florin, but was unable to restore the bank's credibility over the long term, and then the unthinkable happened in the following years and florin eventually lost its status as the world's reserve currency. Indeed, the end of a currency's reserve status is a rare event, and the florin's downfall teaches that preeminence of a central bank does not necessarily guard against fiscal overexploitation or a sudden loss of market confidence. So according to Jeffrey, the history will indeed repeat itself. Just like florin, the Great British Pound also lost its status as world reserve currency. And don't take my word for it. According to IMF's survey of official foreign exchange reserves, the US dollar reserves held by central banks fell to 59% during the fourth quarter of 2020, which is the lowest level in 25 years. And this percentage was 71% when the euro was launched in 1999. So you can see where the things are actually headed. And Jeffrey is not the only expert who has similar views. According to the billionaire US fund manager Stanley Druckenmiller, the dollar could cease to be the predominant global reserve currency within 15 years. He said, "I can't find any period in history where monetary and physical policy were this out of step with the economic circumstances." And many other experts have expressed concerns about increasing inflation and accompanying dollar weakness. Such worries have been a contributory factor to the recent sell-off of the tech stocks and increasing fear of investors. The dollar has survived at least 4 decades worth of predictions of its demise. Yet, Druckenmiller's views on currencies should not be dismissed. After all, he is the person who with George Soros broke the Bank of England when he made a huge profitable bet back in 1992 on sterling leaving the European exchange rate mechanism. Druckenmiller's warning comes against the background of a long-lasting retreat from the dollar as the world has gradually moved towards a multiple reserve currency system. Even before the coronavirus pandemic and the extraordinary economic conditions it has generated, there were signs that the dollar's dominance was slipping. Now let's again have a look at Jeffrey's viewpoints.
And inflation is going to continue to go up, at least in the next couple of months.
Where do you see inflation this year?
Well,
CPI.
Okay. We have to look at different measures of CPI. CPI is at 6.8 right now, year over year. The one that's rolling off for last December is 0.2. So the way things are going, it seems pretty likely that we're going to get a 7 handle on the CPI soon. But the CPI, of course, is a strange construct. It's not calculated the same way as European CPI. If you use the European CPI methodology, our CPI right now would be at 7.8. So it's calculated a little bit differently. Also, there's this strange thing about shelter that's almost a third of our CPI. And shelter includes largely something called owner's equivalent rent. And owner's equivalent rent is not a real thing. It's not like you're going out there and measuring rents. What you're doing is asking people that don't rent out their house, if you did rent out your house, what do you think you'd rent it out for versus last year? As if a regular homeowner that doesn't rent out their house has any idea. I probably couldn't estimate what I could rent my property out for within 20%. I have no idea. I've never looked at it.
As we all know that inflation impacts the cost of living, the cost of doing business, borrowing money, mortgages, corporate and government bonds yields, and every other facet of the economy. Therefore, as the prices increase and the salaries don't catch up with that, it puts people under a lot of stress, especially the working class. And we all know that government statistics cannot be trusted when it comes to inflation. And we all have seen the devastating effects of inflation in Iran, Turkey, Venezuela, and Argentina in the past few years. We have seen that it becomes impossible for people to make ends meet during hyperinflation. A few years back, no one could have imagined the situation that we are in currently. Experts like Michael Burry are signaling the arrival of hyperinflation, and the cost of goods and amenities of life are going through the roof. Fed is trying to mask this situation by giving people the wrong information by deliberately changing the definition of consumer price index over time. This unethical masking of reality won't end well. In this era of social media, news spread fast and people can get access to the information from various sources in the blink of an eye. So we need to prepare for the upcoming disaster. And as we can see in these infographics, US dollar has lost so much value over time that if someone from a century back somehow resurrects, that person will get a heart attack in a few seconds. So we need to educate ourselves and prepare for the upcoming hyperinflation. We should create a well-diversified portfolio and park our wealth into different industrial sectors, precious metals, and other places wisely to safeguard our wealth. Cash is indeed trash. I hope that you liked the content of this video. If you would like to see such videos with my unbiased opinion and my own unique style of analyzing stocks, please drop a like, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video.